Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Pitlane Podcast, Northern Ireland's only podcast dedicated to bringing you the latest news, best analysis and catch up with the top names from 2 and 4 wheels. This week we've decided to take an in-depth look at some pretty sizable developments that have taken place just before we recorded this week's show. Before recapping on all the weekend's action that saw Colin Turkington get his British Touring Car title bid back on track and Johnston Ray maintain a strong start to the World Superbike Championship. First on the agenda, Aaron, is the Isle of Man TT races, and you're going to bring us up to speed with some pretty sizable news and developments on that front. So what have you got for us?
Yes, that's right. TT first on the agenda, and rightly so, given the time of year that it is. I think we'd be just sort of coming out of the far end of race week by this stage of the year, which is quite disappointing that for the second year on the trot, there's no action on the wee rock in the RAC, but it seems that next year it's going to return, and that phrase comes back again, bigger and better than ever. We heard organisers of the Northwest 200 saying it a few weeks ago that they plan to return bigger and better than ever, but the TT organisers have certainly put their money where their mouth is, and they're promising big things with live TV coverage during qualifying and increased access for fans across the world. So it's definitely exciting times ahead. I think they're going to introduce a new class, and it's all positive vibes. It seems like some of the biggest names in the sport have come out in support of the latest moves. And I suppose sometimes when you think that maybe road racing looks dead, something like that comes around the corner to sort of rejuvenate the sport.
But the one thing I find with the TT, it's almost treated differently, correct me if I'm wrong, in the world of road racing, because you get this impression that it will always be there. You've the troubles around the Northwest and the Ulster Grand Prix, but the Isle of Man just seems to be totally immune to that. They always seem to be able to, as you say, reinvent themselves and move forward. I mean, is that a fair assessment?
I would say in some ways you're right there. The fact that the Manx people really buy into what the TT is all about and appreciate it for what it's for. And I suppose that comes with the nature of the small island mentality, so to speak. The TT is the Isle of Man in terms of what the island's about, and they have a public holiday on Senior TT Day on the Friday. Schools are out, everybody just gets to go and enjoy the racing. Obviously, there's going to be people that oppose it no matter where it is, but I think it's definitely a place that's totally different to anywhere else I've ever visited to watch any type of racing. But it's certainly a place I would love to get back to. And who knows, might get over in 2022, but I think I'd need to rob a bank first because it can be quite expensive.
But then listening to some of the coverage online and the interviews that's been given and reading the press release, I'm going to quote one of the organisers here. They've promised that the coverage next year is going to blow your mind and exceed your expectations. And it got me thinking, what can they do differently that isn't being done already? Because if you look, for instance, at WRC All Live, don't know if you've seen it. I'm sure some of the listeners to the podcast will know what I'm talking about. It is basically rolling coverage from the beginning of each day to the closure of each day, and it's a pretty slick operation. So I'm just thinking, what's new? What's going to be different that will encourage people to put their hand in their pocket and type in their credit card details and sign up for this, which I presume is a subscription-based channel. Maybe you know a wee bit more than that, but that's what I'm reading into it.
I think personally, for me, ITV4 has been the go-to for all your Isle of Man TT coverage for years, but it's a 1-hour show in the evening, and it's brilliant. Don't get me wrong. If you're not there, it's probably all you have, bar social media. But to give fans that access of watching qualifying sessions and, feeling that they're there from the comfort of their own living room is definitely special, because it's not the easiest place to access in the world. And with the technology nowadays, it's probably amazing what the television companies are capable of nowadays. And you look at it in the local front, and what BBC Sport NI has achieved at the Northwest 200 in recent years in terms of live coverage and basically being on the grid, during practice, race day, and giving you in-depth analysis and interviews and everything that goes along with it. So, in a much bigger scale, from my point of view, I think if the TT organisers can get close to that, and they're saying they're going to get maybe even overstep that level that's been set here in Northern Ireland, it would be fantastic to see. A lot of people say that sometimes maybe an increase in television coverage can be to the detriment of some events and things like that. But as you know, and I know, it's not always easy to be there on, at a stage in a rally, or at a short circuit event, at a road race. Just the nature of life nowadays, it means that it's not always easy. So I'm looking forward to it. I think that it could be the breath of fresh air that events need, and who knows, it could be something for other events to look into in the future.
Well, these are some of the figures that have been bandied about here. Apparently, there are an estimated 3 million people that make up the current Isle of Man TT fan base. By introducing rolling coverage on the internet, that will be available to a potential 4 billion people. So, it's a lot. It's a lot of money. And the good thing from how I see it, if this is how it's going to be rolled out, the money's going to the event. It's the event organisers. Obviously, they'll probably use a mix of their own equipment, perhaps ATVs, but they're going to benefit in some shape, form, or fashion financially. So that's good, and it helps with the longevity of the event. So they've obviously given a lot of thought, and apparently, fans have had a big say in this, and this is what fans have said would be good. So it's always nice to know they listen to fans rather than just going there paying to watch, and they obviously feel the fans can bring something new to the event. They've listened, and I mean, it has to be welcomed as well, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. And the TT itself is a real spectacle. Even to go and take a walk through the paddock itself, it's just totally surreal and like nothing you ever have seen before. But you even look at some of the sponsors that the event has at the moment. It's been sponsored by Monster Energy for many years now, and that goes to show just how much esteem across the globe that the event is held in, because it's not everybody gets Monster Energy on board and has the backing of such a massive company that's known globally. And we see it, I'm sure, in every shop in every corner of the globe there's a Monster Energy drink on sale. So who knows, the increased TV coverage and the figures that you mentioned there could be just the catalyst for getting the Isle of Man TT to them corners of the globe as well.
I think they've just used this opportunity. COVID has enforced a stop to the Isle of Man TT and other events, and I think the organisers have used this time to just sit, take a step back, and look at how they can move forward. And some of the other key highlights or changes that are in the offing. So we're going to have clearly rolling coverage of the event. There's a new schedule. So from 2023, there's 10 races instead of 8. I think I'm right in saying that, Aaron. There is going to be a new ferry will come online in 2023, and the latest set of figures show that 46,000 people attended the TT. So they're promising better accommodation. So, if it all comes off, fantastic. I'll be the first to congratulate the Isle of Man TT organisers. But would you agree in what I'm saying, that they've used this time constructively to try and reinvent the TT and make it as relevant as it ever was?
Yeah, I don't think that it was ever in any doubt as to, what it was as a spectacle, or having to appreciate it for what it is as an event. I think, as you said rightly there, people have a lot of downtime whenever they're maybe not at work, and their focus wasn't essentially on racing for the past 2 years because they're not needing to worry as much about course setup, riders getting over and all the massive parts that need to come together to make events like that happen. So, if people are sitting around the table and discussing maybe things that have been on the back burner, little ideas that have maybe been in the back burner for years, but just because of one thing and another, they've maybe been unable to get around to it. But it's interesting you say that, about that element of time and, getting to sort of recuperate and recover. You only have to look at the words that were in this morning's newsletter from Michael Dunlop, about how COVID has really helped his career. The break has helped him get fitter and stronger, and he's determined to come back to the sport bigger and better than ever next year. And that would be great to see because, everybody goes to any road race, no matter where it is, to see Michael Dunlop, regardless if you're his biggest fan or not his biggest fan. He's the man that draws the crowd, and you just have to look at, the likes of Armoy there, what he's done there in recent years, and everybody wants to know when they look at the entry list, will Michael Dunlop be there? And I think now from the words that he said today that he might be in a position to maybe compete back in the roads in a bit of a fitter and healthier state. But I can tell you one thing, there's nothing wrong with his right foot, Jason, because I was out on the bicycle there last week, the week before, and he nearly roped me off in that Kia Jeep flying. So there's certainly nothing wrong with his right foot.
Hopefully roadside garages in Korean aren't listening to this bit of the podcast, but they need to be fitter and they need to be healthier and they need to be leaner because, as we've just said, with 10 races scheduled for 2023, that's a big ask. But my concern is the weather. How are you going to cram in 10? 2019 was day after day after day was just continual cancellation because the weather wasn't playing ball. So if you're trying to cram in 10 races in a week, man, if you get bad weather, how do you work with that? Do you hold 3 races in a day, 4 races in a day to try and make up the time that you've lost? It's a bit of a logistical nightmare, isn't it, Aaron, when you think about it?
It'll be difficult, and I suppose that's something that's out of everyone's control. There's nobody can control the weather, and no matter what sporting event it may be, we don't have any say in these things. You look at the Northwest, in recent years, there's been weather has wreaked havoc in it for years, but you get through it. In my opinion, I would say cancellations probably look the more likely event in the case of bad weather, because you're not going to have as much time in your hands to maybe fit in a race because you're going to have those extra races. Would it be a case of prioritizing which races have to be run, like your monuments, as in the senior, the bigger races in the week? If the weather is against you, would it be an option of maybe cutting out, instead of having 2 600 races, have one and run one of the newer classes? I don't know. That's just things from a fan's perspective that I would see as quite logical, but at the end of the day, I'm not the boy that's in the hot seat, so I'll just be sitting at home in the armchair, kicking back, watching all this top quality coverage.
Or the pipe and slippers. Well, tell me, I know it's a difficult answer to the following question, but should we consider Michael Dunlop one of the favourites if the TT goes ahead next year, as we hope it will, along with other events? Is he one of the favourites, or does it depend on the bikes that's beneath him?
Bikes will play a massive part in it, but I think he's won on all the top manufacturers. Honda, he had a win in a Kawasaki, he's won in BMW. So,
whose turn is it now? I know Yamaha, he parted company with them in the eve of the event, didn't he? So that's Suzuki. That was a bit of a...
He had a win in Suzuki too.
Yeah.
But so the man can ride anything that's put beneath him, and it's interesting that I was watching a YouTube video there recently on Lee Johnston's YouTube channel, and it was a discussion between Dean Harrison and John McGuinness about the issue of weight riders' physical condition. And I find it interesting that Dean Harrison said that, a bit of extra weight around the TT actually helps, because for grip and the physical demands that are put on you,
Yeah.
it actually
Keeps
won't make a
the bike.
difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
And science would say the leaner you are, the fitter you are, the better chance you have of winning. But again, it's going to be, and it all depends on the entry list too. You have people like Glenn Irwin, who is going to make his debut at the TT. It's not really the sort of place where in my opinion, you sort of rock up to and maybe just win out the box. But you have Peter Hickman's, Dean Harrison's, Michael Dunlop's, all the top guys there who will no doubt have a bit of cabin fever, and they'll be looking to get back to the Isle of Man to lift a few more monuments and ultimately a bit more prize money, because it's maybe in a barren few years for a few guys who, maybe rely on road racing to sort of boost the kitty a wee bit. But I know a lot of them sort of work and have other occupations outside of road racing, so I'm sure they'll be looking forward to getting back racing.
Well, that's next year, all being well, but close to home and much closer in terms of scheduling is Armoy, and I know you're just champing at the bit to get to that event, and I don't blame you, because I might actually go myself. But what do we know about it? Has there been any more updates or developments in that front?
I think, Jason, the next big one that organisers are holding out for is this, the increase in spectator capacity. So
Yes.
there's been nothing really said as yet. I think I was told that maybe it was to come last Thursday, but I don't think it came, and maybe it could be this week. I don't know, but the only thing that I noticed just before we came on air, that lockdown, the lift of the lockdown has been extended now in England until July the 19th, I think. So that's probably not working in their favour at this stage if, the government here follows suit. But at the end of the day, it's outdoors. There's things stack up in its favour as to why they could have more fans, and there's also things that stack up against it, as to why they might not be allowed fans. But at the end of the day, it's still great to see that we're going to have some racing around Armoy this summer. It's an absolutely fantastic event, and for me, I enjoy all the road races, but I think that element of that it's close to home and where it's situated at lends itself to be one of my favourites in the calendar.
Well, it's definitely got a lot of. I mean, it's quite a fresh, young event, but you would know better than me. But on the odd occasion I would have spoken to a road racer about Armoy, they always said it was a good event, and I suppose that's one of the reasons why it's held in the regard that it is, in the sense that it's one of Ireland's top national road races, despite, as I said, being relatively young. I mean, they've a good team at the helm there.
Absolutely. And I suppose that's reflected in the entry list as well. Michael Dunlop was competed at it every year that it's been going, and it's going over 10 years now, it must be. So, that speaks volumes as the event. And any rider I sort of speak to, I've never heard many of them say that they dislike the track itself. It's fast, it has jumps, fast corners, blind corners, slow corners, fast corners. I think it has all the makings of a fantastic racetrack, and you just have to go round it a wee drive in the car there, and you can sort of envisage for yourself what it would be like riding around it on a motorcycle. I'm sure it's a great feeling, and let's hope that the sun shines at the end of July and it's another great event.
Have you ever been riding the bike and get the knee down, get the elbow down, have you?
If I tried to get the knee and elbow down, I would probably end up the whole thing down and a trip to the hospital.
Well, maybe not bother doing that then. We need to hear each week, not in the hospital, sucking through a straw. Well, that was, that definitely is good. The sense where Armoy is brewing nicely, and as I said, I've been to it on a few occasions, and it definitely is a top event. And I suppose a lot of people is excited about the fact, if he's true to his word, Guy Martin's coming back this year. So, I mean, again, it's like a Marmite character. You either like him, you don't. And I mean, you can't accuse the guy of not trying when he was given the bikes. But is it something that you will look forward to when you try and grab a word with him? Should he sort of bless us with his presence?
Absolutely. You know, the more the merrier, Jason. He's as you say, he's a Marmite type character. I've never really had many dealings with him in the past. The last time I spoke to him when he came over here to race at Tandragee a couple of years ago, when he was riding that. I think he was riding that BSA, which he might be racing at Armoy this year too, the classic superbike, and he was just over for a bit of crack. And the side to racing that a lot of people know and love, sort of that whole racing out the back of the van, and maybe a little bit more chilled out for a guy. You have to remember that he's had his day of racing the big teams. He was at Tyco BMW, you know, he was at Honda as well, and he had an outing with Wilson Craig's Honda team as well. So he's had his time at the top, and I suppose there's a fine art of knowing when you're maybe not at that level to compete with the big boys. So, you know, I don't think his pedigree's in any doubt, but I'm sure he'll enjoy getting over for a little bit more of a relaxed run at Armoy in a few weeks' time.
He's not a conventional character when you talk about speaking to him at Tandragee. I recall speaking to him the year he was in the same Honda team as John McGuinness. And I rang him at, he was in England doing a pre-Northwest test, and everything was more or less agreed. And then at the last minute, the Honda PRO representative says, "No, Guy can't do it. We're running behind schedule here." And I kind of thought to myself, "Oh, crap! I've set a page aside to speak to Guy Martin." I was looking forward to it because you know yourself, this job's about speaking to people and getting under their skin a wee bit and finding out about them. And then when I was just about to head out of the office, the phone rang, and it was Guy Martin.
Yeah, well, at least he rang you back.
He did, and it wasn't, as I say, a conventional conversation, because I felt he was asking me more questions than I was asking him. And he was saying to me, you know, "What do you expect of me on the new Honda Fireblade?" And I said, "Well, I suppose you're coming over to the Northwest. We'd like to see you at least challenging for a podium finish, if he felt that was possible." And they hummed and they had him, but he was so nice. He wasn't in any way thrown or twisted. I think he is the kind of guy sometimes that he can be a bit misunderstood, in the sense that he does value, or he does take on board what people say. Now, whether he thinks you're right or wrong is another matter. But I just found it's not strange, but very few people, as you know, when you're interviewing it, people will ask you a question that kind of catches you off guard. So what do you say? We're used to asking the questions, but I don't think it's a great Northwest that year, did they? And I know that was the year John McGuinness at Primrose came off, and did he break an arm? Is that right?
That was
the flyby. Is that the fly-by-wire? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think McGuinness was part teammate Lee Johnston the year that happened, but this guy was definitely at Honda. You could be right, but I'm just not 100% sure on that one. But I agree with you in the sense that he's quite misunderstood. And, you know, you'd look at that famous interview where he said about the chicanes at the Northwest and disliking it for that reason. Yeah. But look, it's a matter, everybody's got an opinion, you know, and you hear the stories about the late, great Joey Dunlop. Maybe didn't have a lot of love for riding at the Northwest 200. It was his home circuit. And Gary, his son, was on this show a few weeks back, and he as much as said that, you know, that his father used the Northwest to get bikes set up for the TT, but nobody thought any less of him for it. So, you know, it comes down to opinions, and everybody develops their own. People don't like things that you and I do, but sure, it doesn't stop us from doing them, does it?
Absolutely, and it won't stop us from doing it. So, the boy says, run and jump. Well, I think we've bored our listeners enough about bikes. Can we change the conversation to cars very quickly?
We can. And I believe that you have some news for us on the developments with Oliver Solberg and Aaron Johnston.
Yeah, this is a relationship or a partnership, whichever way you want to describe it, that seems to be really blossoming for these two.
Before you go any
Oliver,
further,
yes,
Oliver Solberg is the son of the
of
great Peter Solberg,
that's right, the 2003 World Rally Champion Petter. Yeah,
but Aaron Johnston, that sounds like a name that's quite close to home. It doesn't really sound Swedish, does it?
no, it doesn't. I don't know what the Swedish equivalent of that would be, but the Warren Johnston heralds from Fintona, so he's not a million miles from us. And again, we've said it before. This is a very small part of the world, but it does produce a lot of great sporting talent when it comes to motor racing and motorbike racing. So yeah, Aaron and Oliver, at the minute their trajectory is just going up and up and up and up. And Oliver's only 19, but at the weekend he won the World Rally Car element of Rally d'Alba, and that was only his, if my maths is correct, that was only his uh, first appearance in a World Rally Car on tarmac, and it was only his second appearance in a World Rally Car to date. So, granted, he won the event because his teammate, he arrived at a time control late, and he incurred quite a hefty penalty, therefore handing the win to Oliver and Aaron. But at 19, to just go into that car and to look as comfortable as he does, and to be setting consistently quick times, and I think more importantly than that, at 19, Aaron, you could get in that car and just be overwhelmed by the whole thing and have a rush of blood to the head and end up putting the car on its roof or on its side. And you're nobody's friend then, because you just caused damage to a car worth £500,000, and you have to sort of reset and regroup. But Oliver just seems to have this maturity, and obviously, as you mentioned, he's got his dad there who has been there, he's done it. And there's also Hyundai Motorsport boss Andrea Adamo, who, let's be honest, if we think Michael Deluxe to the point, you haven't, you need to listen to Andrea Adamo. He just calls a spade a spade. There's no two ways about it. And I think I don't think though he takes that approach with Oliver. I think he's a very much another father figure for him. He can see the potential there, and he likes to nurture him and encourage him. And he just said to him before the event, there's no pressure here. Go out, enjoy it, learn the car, learn more about yourself and Aaron, and whatever you get, you get. And I think that's refreshing because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure it's the same with bikes. When people are handed opportunities like these, there's always an expectation to give something back. Would you say that's right?
I would say to an extent, but the old cliche is a happy rider is a fast rider, happy driver is a fast driver, and I suppose the Solberg's team boss is maybe just trying to, get the best out of him in a roundabout way. You take into account football managers, they identify some players, some need an arm around them, some need a good telling off.
The backside.
So it's just horses for courses and all that. Everybody reacts differently to things, and that's maybe just his way of getting the best out of people, which could well be.
I suppose some people are saying, "Oh, Adamo's putting a lot of trust in a 19-year-old," but I was doing some basic maths. Maths wasn't my strongest subject at school, so you'll have to excuse me. But Oliver Solberg is relatively new to rallying per se, so he made his debut at Rally GB in an R5 car in 2019, and he's made 11 starts since then. And of those 11 starts, 2 have been in a World Rally car, and not just any World Rally car, a fully factory-backed car that is one of the quickest in the World Rally Championship. So that really tells you all that you need to know, and all the listener needs to know when it comes to the the manner in which he's viewed by Andrea. And of course, it's not only about Oliver, there's Aaron there as well. Aaron he's young, he's learning, but he's having to grow up quickly as well because he's working with engineers outside the car. He's trying to keep an eye on Oliver inside the car. When it comes to making pace notes, car setup changes. So, they're learning quickly and there's a lot being put on them. But, so far they're standing the test of time. They're anything that's been through their way, they seem to be more than capable of dealing with it. And literally hours before they won Rally d'Alba in Italy on Sunday was confirmation that they're returning to the World Rally Championships top tier on the Safari Rally. And I'm sure you've seen the Safari Rally out in the bush with the giraffes and the elephants. Well, they're going there next weekend. And that's, if you asked one driver what would be their box ticked, I must go to that event, I must drive in that event rally, the Safari has to be up there. So at 19, he's getting this chance. Aaron's going to be sitting alongside him. I would give my right arm, my left arm, my right leg, my left leg, and my head to actually be in that car because it would just be such an adventure. And they're going there with no expectation other than, as I say, just to learn and enjoy yourselves. And I think that's really refreshing because this is a potential world champion here we have, and he's only 19, but the signs are just so encouraging, and he never seems to get overwrought by it all. He's always smiling. He always smiles, and I think he's so grateful for what he's getting. It's not a case where if he don't. I mean, a couple of events ago, he couldn't make it to Portugal because he had to quarantine. His father tested positive for COVID, and he had to quarantine in Portugal. And rather than being downbeat and getting cross and narky, he just said, "Listen, it is what it is. We'll take it as a learning experience, as part of life. We move on." And what a difference a couple of weeks make. He's won a rally and he's heading back to the World Rally Championship on one of the most spectacular events. So he definitely has his head screwed on. And as I say, it's going to be really encouraging to see how he gets on. And they'll have a really favourable road position as well on Safari. They're running sort of towards the back of the World Rally car field. So definitely, results-wise, don't see any reason why he couldn't finish top 7, top 6. It's definitely within his capability.
And it's crazy to just, put into context the fact of that young lad, Aaron Johnston there from Fintona.
Yeah.
County Tyrone, now he's going to be, it's mad to think where his sport has taken him.
There's always it's like anything, whether it's cricket, football, golf, only a small percentage of people in life make it to the top tier of their sport. You've probably a greater chance of doing it in cricket or football or rugby because there's more clubs and more teams. In rallying, your chances are so much smaller because there only is 3 works teams: Hyundai, Toyota, and M Sport Ford. So your chance of actually breaking into those top 3 teams is harder still. So to be in the position that Oliver and Aaron are in now at the minute, and for somebody from Northern Ireland who, let's be honest, Oliver Solberg, the name Solberg, people know that across the world or would have an idea about it. Aaron Johnston is less well known, but he has stuck to the task. He has proven himself again on many occasions, and that's stuck by him. And we have seen a few co-driver changes in the World Rally Championship over the last 12 months. Aaron, we've seen Danny Sordo change his, Terry Neville's changed his, Gus Greensmith has gone for Ballyclare's Chris Patterson's bringing out a bit of experience. But so far, Aaron Johnston, despite his young age, everyone seems happy with him. They feel that he's up to the task, and more power to his elbow. I wish I was doing what he was doing. I think a lot of people would, and he's certainly done his chances no harm of continuing his already fantastic and successful journey with Oliver going forward.
That was a name that sort of blast from the past for me. I think I picked up on something either written or maybe on Twitter somewhere where Danny Sordo, That's a name that's been around the WRC for a long time.
Mr. Reliable is really what Danny Sordo is. Andrea Adamo gave a fantastic line during Rally to Portugal, and he said he's like a Navy SEALman. He drops in and he does a job and he gets out again. You know what you're going to get with him. Now, we can't say that about him in Rally Sardinia. He made an uncharacteristic mistake and the car ended up on its side with rear damage. But that's generally Danny Sordo is. You put your mortgage on him that he'll do what you ask him to do. And I think he's looking to continue beyond 2021 into 2022. So yeah, he's dependable. He is consistent, and he brings a lot to a team as well. He's been around the block more than a few times, and I'm sure people like Oliver, who is in the same team as Danny, that can only be a good thing. It rubs off the experience. You know the way my experience doesn't tend to rub off on you.
Well,
You
just
think you
getting
know
back.
everything.
No, just getting back to that point. I just had a wee light bulb moment. You were right about the whole Guy Martin, John McGuinness thing, because I think that Guy Martin had retired and then had come back to race, couldn't turn down Honda and came back to race, and hated it. Hated the Honda.
That's the year of the false neutral in the Isle of Man, isn't it not?
Could have been, but that was the year McGuinness got hurt at the Northwest.
I think that bike, from memory, there was the throttle issue, and I'm really sure.
Yeah.
At the
Gearbox.
TT,
yeah,
the false neutral. So less
You're
said
right.
about the bear.
You're right.
Who's the motorbike correspondent here? Is it me or is it you?
You're just a jack of all trades.
A master of none. But no, 2017, because remember, it was practice. It was the first day of practice, wasn't it? And John McGuinness came off and it didn't sound too good. So, but just when we're talking about riders suffering injuries, Jamie Hamilton, I saw he had a post up on Facebook during the week, and is it 4, maybe 5 years since his accident? But he said his recovery's come a long way in that time. I mean, it's you need a lot of resolve, don't you, Aaron, to sort of come back from that and to keep on the straight and narrow, as it were.
Absolutely, and you could see him riding regularly at all the events, whether it's short circuit events or road races, even mini bikes, whatever's going on, he tends to be there just to sort of, I suppose, keep involved, and he's a lot of friends in the sport as well. So, it's one of them things where you never, despite injury, you probably never turn your back on it fully, because these guys, you have to remember, have been brought up in the sport for years and years. So, it's all they know at the end of the day.
Well, it's a well-trodden saying, but it literally is. It's in your DNA. It's in your blood. If it's all you've known for most of your life, it's so hard just to cut your ties. Whether the sport has been good to you or whether it's been, in the case of Jamie, not so good. It's something that you're familiar with and the faces within that sport. And it's hard to just turn your back on it and walk away from it, I suppose.
That's it. And, a lot of people, just the man that we're talking about, Guy Martin, walked away from it, come back and walked away from it, and now he's back again. So, you just can't shake it. It's one of them things. You just keep coming back. And, Gary Dunlop touched on it a couple of weeks ago. He said that the thrill that you get from road racing, you'll never get that anywhere else, no matter what you try in life. So he's walked away from it. Well, he says he's walked away from it from the meantime, but let's see if he gets a fever in a few weeks' time. You never know. He might see him in the grid yet.
As I know you, for those that don't know, Aaron has the motorbike license. Is competition something that you'd ever entertain, or maybe not so much to win, but just to experience the whole atmosphere of going to an event and all the processes and signing this and scrutineering that and lining up for qualifying and race day? Is that something you'd ever like to do?
I think there's a totally drastic difference of riding a motorcycle on the road and doing what them boys do. Would I try it? Might do. Could I afford it? Definitely not. So it's not something that
Don't believe that.
I'll be venturing into in the near future anyway.
Well, I think that's a lot of the ground covered in terms of the main talking points from the TT to Armoy and Oliver Solberg and Aaron Fintna. And as is now customary at this point of the podcast, I'm just going to have a little recap over some of the action that's taken place around the globe concerning guys from Northern Ireland. And we'll also look ahead to what's coming up this Saturday and Sunday. So, Aaron, what should we be keeping a lookout for, and who has done well and who hasn't done as well over the last couple of days?
Well, it was World Superbikes the weekend past at Misano in Italy. Jonathan Rea had a hat-trick of third places, which was still on the podium for him, but maybe just not the high levels of success he commands and maybe expects from himself now. But I suppose you can't win all the time. But nonetheless, on the podium in every race, you can't really fault that too much. He was very lucky not to crash in race one. I'm sure you've seen the video that was floating about over the weekend there. That's art form, that, to keep the bike up from that point there. I don't know how they do it. I watch it. You see Marc Marquez doing it in MotoGP as well. It's just, I don't know. It just defies any physics laws that are out there, but they manage it time and time again, and fair play to them. But I think it was probably Ducati's weekend in Misano. Michael Ruben Rinaldi, he got the first two. He got the 2 wins on the Aruba Ducati. So, good weekend for them. Top Rack, the Turkish rider, who's Ray's main challenger, he, had another consistent weekend. Again, he was on the podium every time. So, he's maybe seeing now that he's not going to get it all his own way. There's boys breathing down his neck there, and it'll be a real test for him. But at the end of the day, he's still got a healthy lead at the top of the championship. 20 points it is now. So
20 points, right? Okay.
It's for those that maybe don't know too much about racing. It seems a lot, but it's not really. If you were to throw in a crash or two here and there, Ray's not really known for crashes. But if you're having to push, sometimes things can creep in, or accidents happen in racing, and you never know what's around the corner. But he's coming Donington and Assen next, 2 tracks that he's just the king of Assen. So he'll, I'm sure, be back in the top steps sooner rather than later. And then British Superbike starts not this weekend coming, but the weekend after. Lots of local talent throughout the classes there on show, but we'll probably talk about that a bit more in next week's show. But I have to say, I can't wait for that one. For me, it's the best championship of the lot. It's just, it would be the one that
elbows out, rubbing fairness.
Exactly. It's just I don't know if it's maybe because there's more local interest and you can identify with it a bit more in terms of maybe knowing people, identifying by circuits and stuff like that. I don't know, but it's just, for me, it's probably my favorite. And it's, great. The entertainment aspect of it is phenomenal. The whole showdown, the way the championship is run, and it's just a lot of riders fighting out for positions, and there's no such thing as one guy who sort of runs away with it. Yes, Josh Brooks has been the dominant figure for a number of years on the Ducati, but he doesn't get it all his own way, so it makes for entertaining racing. But this weekend is the German Grand Prix at the Sachsenring in Germany, so that'll be an interesting one. because Marc Marquez has been the top rider in the Premier Class in MotoGP there for the last decade. I was reading there where he's had 10 pole positions and 10 wins in the last 10 years at the event, which is
some record.
Some going, but we know what his situation is at the minute in terms of the arm injury, and also the fact that the Honda doesn't seem to be just as competitive as some of the other bikes in the paddock. So this could be the perfect opportunity for somebody to go and knock him off his perch, but time will tell.
What way is the rule cycle for MotoGP? Is there any rule cycle? Is it up for review, or are they sticking with the same formula for another 3-4 years? Do you know?
In terms of
with the rallying, it's the rules from next year for 3 years is bringing in hybrid kits. So are they downsizing engines in MotoGP, or are they sticking with the same engines? You know where they always seem to fettle and tweak things. Bigger wheels in Formula One, for instance, are they bringing in smaller wheels, or are they just sticking with the formula that they have for MotoGP for the immediate future?
I haven't read any in the last, since coming on this show, but
do you think it needs a shake up, Aaron?
We've had this year that the normal engines and aerodynamics, they were sort of frozen this year. So is that something, that'll come back next year? Possibly. We've seen, the developments of wings and all the sort of aerodynamic things that have been introduced, lightweight wheels, all that type of stuff, the difference that they've made. But the one thing that gets me is the fact that, satellite teams then don't get the benefits, because they're sort of, if the factory teams getting all the parts, and some satellite teams, it's taking its time to sort of get down the line to them. So it'll be an interesting one to see, but does it need a shake up? It's enjoyable. You've Quartararo, a few young lads coming in there in the championship, and sort of, to say changing of the guard, I think, it's the changing of the guard happened a few years ago with the likes of Lorenzo departing, Danny Pedrosa, Rossi was probably past his best. So I think we're now seeing the likes of Quartararos, and last year Johan Mir won the title. The guys like that coming through, and they're taking their chance now. So I think the future's bright for MotoGP. And again, it's competitive, and if you sit down and watch it some Sunday, you'll see for yourself. It's definitely worth sitting down and putting TV on for.
Well, this is a question that is always bandied about, the two-wheel camp and the four-wheel camp, which is quicker, a motorbike or a car? And most people would say on the road, for instance, a motorbike hands down is the faster of the two. But I came across an interesting stat today. Now, a lap of Portimao in Portugal, which would you say is quickest? An F1 car, a hypercar, an LMP2 car, or a MotoGP bike?
I'd probably say Formula One car, Jason.
Yep. You're spot on the money. And where would you rank the MotoGP bike?
I would say maybe bottom, because you take into consideration what the grip levels a car has around the track compared to one wheel of a motorbike. It speaks for itself. I think, I'm not surprised to hear that. But again, it comes down to opinions, but arguments like that don't really wash for me, because, a car...
Too many variables.
Yes, and in terms of technology, we all know that Formula One is well above anything else. It's had aerodynamic wings for years, whereas MotoGP only started introducing them a few years ago. So it might be behind the times in that sort of stretch, but at the end of the day, it's a totally different style and type of racing. It's just, it's like, you wouldn't, a MotoGP bike wouldn't be the fastest. Just because it's the best, it doesn't mean it's going to be the fastest. Because it might cost £1 million or around that, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to do everything you want it to.
Well, they all lapped Portimao in 1 minute, but the F1 car did it in an 18.348. So 1 minute, 18.348. A hypercar in 1 minute, 30.364. An LMP2 car in 31.210, and a MotoGP bike can do a lap in 1 minute, 38.862 seconds. So, as you said, the whole downforce contact patch, that does have a massive bearing. But then I always wonder how much technology from F1, for instance, filters down into everyday cars. Rear diffusers was a big thing in F1 when it came out, and it's only really within the last 4 or 5 years that we've actually seen diffusers trickle down into road cars. So yeah, I agree with you. F1 cars are the pinnacle, but I'm a bit like you in the argument of cars and bikes. I don't actually see F1 being the pinnacle in terms of technology because it's not always relevant to a road car. You're going to say I'm biased, and people who are listening and know me will say I'm biased, but I think the best representation for a car is a rally car. I mean, you can go into your local Ford dealership or Toyota or Hyundai and you can buy a Fiesta or a Yaris or an A20, and it more or less is the same car on the stages except for a massive big wing and some aero, which and all intents and purposes you can see, albeit in scaled back versions, on their performance cars. So yeah, F1 fans won't like me saying this, but I actually don't put too much weight in F1 because a lot of technology just takes years for it to come downstream, and generally you're having to pay through the nose for it. I mean, KERS, energy recovery, probably it's a great thing, and it's now starting to come into mild hybrid systems. But yeah, kind of lost my way with that argument. But my point is there are other more affordable and relevant codes where the technology, you can see the technology trickling down a lot more quickly.
And I think that's probably why maybe I enjoy watching British Superbikes or World Superbikes just a wee bit more because
you can see that correlation, can't you? You can see the resemblance. You know that bike has been taken off an assembly line. It's been shipped to a set of guys who have basically, okay, a lot of the stuff isn't the same as the showroom, but it resembles the showroom version. A lot of the nuts and bolts have been lightened and whatever they do with it, but it's basically the same bike that you can buy in the. I mean, Super Stock's a perfect example of 1000cc. It's more or less a stock bike, albeit been raced at the TT. So yeah. Anything else? Sorry, I digress. I've went off script there.
Nope,
eating into your motorbike time.
Nope.
Sorry.
No, that was me. I was happy enough with the whole Sachsenring Marc Marquez chat about him being the king of the Sachsenring as the saying goes. But we'll leave that for another day, sure.
Yeah, well, I would say, do you think is he going to make it 11 out of 11 or bit of a tall order?
Personally, I don't think so. The only thing I would say is the Sachsenring is mostly it's very technical and fast and sort of short. So the short nature of the race might suit him, but who knows? Again, it'll depend on a lot of different things. I know that it's his right arm that's giving him the bother.
Okay.
From that injury, so the Sachsenring would probably favour. There's a lot more left-hand turns on it, which might help him a little bit, might give him some sort of advantage. But I think the competitive nature of the class at the moment would sort of suggest that he probably wouldn't have the pace to run at the front. But again, a couple of weeks more rest in the arm and a bit more recovery time, as Michael Dunlop talked about, can work wonders. So we'll see how he goes this weekend. But you touched on the touring cars at the weekend. We had Chris Smiley on recently. How did he get on?
Chris and Colin Turkington were both in action again. This was round 2, and each round there's 3 races. So they were at Snetterton and Norfolk over the weekend. Chris, he made steady gains really. He came 10th in race 1 and 11th in race 2 and 3. So he was more than pleased with that. And I suppose really the only way for him is up. As for Colin, he set the second fastest time in qualifying on Saturday after a top 10 shootout. And it later transpired that Gordon Shedden, who had gone fastest, he was disqualified because the rear wing on his Honda Civic was 1 degree the wrong way. So it wasn't within the parameters of what was allowed.
1 degree.
So yeah, what is it? It's nothing. But rules are rules, I suppose, as they will saying. He was disqualified. Colin inherited pole position for Sunday, made the most of it in the first race. He won, set the fastest lap. So yeah, great for him. Race 2, he was leading up until 3 laps from the end when he was overtaken. But I think, all things considered, he'll be happy with second place in race 2, and then in race 3 with the reverse grid coming into effect, he finished 7th overall. So that moves him up to 3rd in the standings, Aaron, 5 points off the lead. So after a pretty ropey opening round at Thruxton, he's pretty much bang on the money and back in the mix again. So that's good news for Colin, and obviously Chris, who we've had in the show a couple of weeks back. As you say, he seems to be gelling with that Hyundai i30M. So on that front, all good.
And he did, say that he didn't come across as arrogant by no means, but he certainly portrayed himself as confident in his own ability. And he did tell us that, he wants to be up there and run the sharp end. So Chris certainly believes in himself.
I would say there's going to be a few more eyes on Chris and his teammates, because Tom Ingram actually won in the Hyundai at the weekend. He won a race, the first for the car and the first for Accelerate Motorsport, who run that car. So there's naturally people's going to be thinking, well, if Tom Ingram can do it, Chris Smiley should be doing it. So that ratchets up the tension a little bit. But I would agree with you. Chris isn't work shy. He knows what he needs to do, and I'm sure as the season progresses, he will start to climb the leaderboard, and we'll see some strong results from him. Staying with the track theme, we're heading back to Portimao in Portugal. It seems to be a happy hunting ground for me. That was the second round of the World Endurance Championship, and that took place on Sunday. A nice meaty 8-hour marathon there. Lovely 8 hours of racing around a track. Can't think of anything worse, really. Good thing they shared the car, because you'd be dizzy by the end of it. But anyway, Wayne Boyd, he had a fantastic performance, a fantastic debut actually on his World Endurance Championship debut. He was called into the team at the 11th hour after Fabio Scherer tested positive for COVID. So that was on Thursday. He got the call to get to Portugal. By Friday, he was trackside. He had very little time in this car. This is an LMP2 car. He races an LMP3, not LMP2. So it's pretty much, he's tested an LMP2, so it's not entirely new to him, but it's a big step up, and there's a lot more to learn about the car and familiarise yourself with. But as a collective, he played his part and helped the team to finish 3rd overall. So that was a fantastic result for him and his driving mates and for United Autosports. And afterwards he said, for me to get on the podium in my first World Endurance round is pretty good. So all things considered, great weekend for him. Not so good for the station racing, and that includes Donald Moore's Andrew Watson. They qualified 8th in the GTE field for Sunday's race, and 2 hours in, well, their car was collected by the hypercar Scuderia Cameron Glickenhaus driver Ryan Briscoe, and that was it. Engine damage, couldn't go any further. So the highs of one driver and the lows of another. That's suppose why we follow this sport and why we take part in it. It's the low points make you appreciate the highs a bit more, really, don't they?
That's it.
Just very quickly, more success the weekend this time in rallying for Kilrea's Josh McErlane. We've mentioned that name a few times already. Definitely one to keep an eye on. He finished 3rd on only his 2nd start on Rally d'Alba, and he was the 2nd highest R5/Rally 2 driver. What else do we have? We have another busy weekend ahead of us. I know bikes is busy, and it's all action on the car front. We have the first round of the Northern Ireland Rally Championship this Saturday. There's 101 cars lined up for that event, so that tells you there's a lot of pent-up demand. Rally Poland heralds the start of Callum Devine's European Rally Championship adventure. He is out in a Ford Fiesta Rally 2 with backing from Motorsport Ireland, and when it comes to first rounds, they don't really come any more difficult than this. You've got Craig Breen, Andreas Mikkelsen, you've the reigning ERC champion Alexei Litvinuk, and you've got Nikolai Greisen all taking part. So if anything, it's going to be a good test for Callum, but I'm sure he'll do well. And then just finally, Belfast Jack Young, he's heading to Holland this week for round 3 of the TCR Europe Junior Trophy. I admitted it last time, so I apologise to Jack, but he actually won in the south of France at the end of May. He won a race, and that result was good enough to move him up to 3rd in the trophy stand. And so the 19-year-old's living up to his billing of challenging for silverware this year, and certainly being in the running for bigger and better things. So let's hope we can keep that going and building that early success on. And I'm sure we'll get him on the show maybe down the line and get his views on the series and what this year's taught him, if anything.